That's right. It's a very big decision because once you fire that J2 engine for translunar injection, you are very committed. But there's one more thing we have to do. We have to get the lunar module out of its little garage. Well, the first thing is we separate the command service module.
There we go, with the astronauts on the top.
Yeah, right, and that moves off about a few hundred yards. And then these panels, there are actually 4 of them in real life, get jettisoned and go into orbit around the sun.
Okay, and the command pilot then has to fly this back round.
That's right, turn it around and come in and just gently dock it nose to nose.
So we've docked, and then this used the engine on the command module, I presume?
The little thrusters around the service module to just gently pull it out.
And there's the fragile lunar module exposed to space, and then this will head off towards the moon.
Well, having gone to all that trouble to accelerate, it's now time to slow down again and get captured into orbit around the moon. So as the spacecraft goes behind the moon, it's time to fire the service module engine to slow them down.
And of course, they're completely cut off from Earth during that time.
It's not until they reappear around the moon and they can talk to Houston again that they know everything's under control.
How long do they stay in lunar orbit?
About a day before they start the descent.
Okay, and the first step of that is separating these two.
Apollo 11, Houston, we are go for undocking, over. Roger, understand.
The Eagle has wings. Once again, it's behind the moon where they have to make another critical burn of their rocket engine to drop them out of lunar orbit. They come back around here and their low point of the orbit is 50,000 feet, and that's when they turn the engine on again for the final powered descent to the moon.
Eagle, Houston, we rig you now. You're a go for PDI, over. Roger, understand.
And so finally, Armstrong and Aldrin are on their way down to the Sea of Tranquility.
We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good.
Absolutely everything has to go right.
And it very nearly didn't, because as they pitched over ready to land, they realized they were heading for a field full of boulders. So Armstrong took manual control and hovered, looking for somewhere safe to put it down.
In fact, they had less than 30 seconds of fuel left.
30 seconds, over.
Yes, that's right. Mission Control were very anxious.
Contact light. Tranquility base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
And there we are on our version of the Sea of Tranquility, waiting for Neil Armstrong to take his one small step onto the lunar surface.
That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind.
There are 6 Apollo landing sites on the moon's surface, and the location of these are relatively easy to find. To do so, we can enlist the help of 2 figures, which can be seen at the time of full moon. On the right-hand half of the moon is a figure known as the Lady in the Moon. Now, she has 2 big bunches of hair on the top of her head, marked by the Mare Serenitatis and Mare Tranquillitatis. And where these 2 come together, that marks the general position of where Apollo 17 landed, at Taurus Littrow. Now, if you can imagine where her ear would be, just below the Mare Tranquillitatis, the very top of her ear marks the general location where the very first Apollo landing site was, in the Sea of Tranquility, Apollo 11. At the base of her ear, if you can imagine where that would be, where her earlobe would be, that's where Apollo 16 landed, in the Descartes Highlands. OK, so that's 3 of the landing sites identified. Now, to find the other 3, we have to use another figure who resides on the left-hand side of the moon. And he's known as the basketball player. He's got his back to us, so we're seeing the back of his head, the top of his shoulders. His right arm is up in this position, and his left hand is up above his head, having just thrown the ball, which is marked by the Mare Crisium. To locate the location of the Apollo 15 landing site, this is just above his right ear, about this position on his head. Apollo 15, of course, landed by the Hadley Rill. Now, the other 2 landing sites are actually quite close together. Apollo 12 sits just on the top of his shoulder here, and Apollo 12 landed in the Sea of Storms. Apollo 14 is between his hand and his shoulder, and the location of Apollo 14 was Frau Moro. So using these 2 figures help us to find the Apollo landing sites.
Pete, John, Chris, thank you very much.
Houston, Apollo 10, we've got a beautiful view of the Earth here, but it's absolutely fantastic.
So, Patrick, what were your most significant moments from the Apollo program?
First, the actual touchdown. There was so much that could have gone wrong and no provision of rescue. So when I heard Neil's voice coming through, the Eagle has landed, I felt immense relief.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
And then, just a few hours later, the first step onto the surface. What's the significance of that moment?
It showed that the gap between two worlds had been bridged. The moon was there, and we can go there.
And of course, they got back safely, and just a year later,
Yes.
Armstrong was sitting in front of you as a guest on The Sky at Night. I thought we'd take a look at that film right now.
Right, yeah.
When you were actually walking about on the moon's surface and kicking about a certain amount of dust, did you notice any local colour? And also, were you at all subconsciously worried about the possibility of unsafe areas?
Well, the color is a puzzling phenomenon on the moon, aside from the characteristics that I've already mentioned. You generally have the impression of being on a desert-like surface with rather light-colored hues, yet when you look at the material at close range, as if in your hand, you find it's a charcoal gray, in fact.
That was 1970. Patrick, do you remember that interview?
I do indeed. I remember it very vividly. It was a great honour too.
What fascinates me is your questions to Neil Armstrong there are clearly inspired by being an observer of the moon, talking about colours and appearances. I've got some of your observations here.
Oh, they're very primitive.
Well, I know, but it's fascinating for people like me who are used to sitting in front of a computer as an astronomical researcher. This is December the 3rd, 1954. Area of the moon called Delaunay?
Delaunay, yes.
Delaunay. An incredible formation, evidently the fusion of several features, complex and massive, and has clearly suffered several phases of remelting. Then you discuss the technical details of what you're seeing in the drawing, and then conditions rapidly becoming worse. Unfortunately, no choice but to stop observing. The mist gathered, and by 1900 hours, the moon was completely obscured. You can hear your voice there, but this was useful research. Why were the NASA and the Russians interested?
Well, we had to get maps of the moon, particularly what they call the libration areas, are brought in and out of view. Like that, for example.
These are the edges of the moon. So
And
this is...
many of us were doing it, but I was a very small cog in a very large wheel.
But as a group, you made a huge contribution because it was these areas that connected the familiar near side to the
The
far
lunar
side.
observers did, undoubtedly.
Mapping the moon was the contribution of the early part of the space race. And I think we've got a clip of you talking about just that with Eugene Cernan, the last man to stand on the moon's surface.
A great man was him.
We studied, due to a great deal of your work, of course, on the mapping of the moon, we studied the area we were going to land so well that I really believe I knew it, at least from the air, from above, as well as I know my own backyard.
What was the most unexpected thing to you?
The most unexpected thing was actually all of a sudden finding myself on the surface of the moon, realizing that it was quiet, the engines were shut down, I have sort of severed my links with life and humanity. You're there on the moon, and you stop and think, I'm there. Surprise, you're really here at this moment.
They do seem to make walking on the moon fun, don't they, Cernan and Smith?
It must be glad to have only 1/6 your Earth weight.
Yes, I'm sure all the astronauts enjoyed that. This is a man enjoying himself, Buzz Aldrin, of course.
I caught up with him a few weeks ago, passed to London.
Yes, and I've just about forgiven you for not taking me with you. I would have liked to meet Buzz, but let's see what he has to say anyway.
Indeed.